Hello, everyone. This is Dave Raff with ReaganRadioNetwork.com and Lake of the Ozarks Radio.com. It's time now for another news segment with Dr. Jim Dempsey and Parenting Unchained, and this is all part of his Parenting Unchained series that we have available on ReaganRadiostore.com. Okay, Dr. Dempsey, we're ready to rock and roll. How are you?
We're great here in Texas today. We've had 3 days of rain. And we went a long time through the summer without any, so this has been nice. I know they've had flash flood warnings up in our area, but I've been high and dry, or at least high. I don't know about too dry. But it's good. Anytime in Texas we get rain, we are just really grateful for it. I'm excited about our show today, particularly just because I have a guest with us. I'll be getting to interview a friend of mine. Normally I want to tell you the name of our show. We've titled today's show, Fostering and Adopting Equals Pure Religion. To say it again, Fostering and Adopting Equals Pure Religion. That's the title of our show today. We're going to talk about fostering children and adopting children, that process. And my special guest is a pastor and a friend. His name is Clint Neighbors, and his wife, Julie. And Clint's special for a lot of reasons, and I'll tell you the most recent one. He was unfortunately involved in a pretty bad car crash. I saw pictures of the car, and it does not look good. And he miraculously survived that, was in the hospital for a few days. But he's had a miraculous recovery. He's still sitting here with a neck brace on. So he's got a little more work to do. But given the situation, and we can ask him about that a little bit later, but it's a miracle that he's still alive and he's walking and recovering so well. He's also special in that he's been a great encourager to me as a friend since we're relocating here to the Austin area and tried to find some other family pastors. And I had come across Clint through an involvement with parenting seminars. And so we've had lunch a number of times. I've gotten to do a parenting seminar for his church, which is Legacy Church here in Round Rock, Texas, a suburb on the north side of Austin. Clint's a good guy. He's a family pastor. He's a triathlete, which definitely sets him apart from me. I am not tri or double or any kind of athlete, but he is, and he's a wonderful leader. So that's exciting for me. The real reason that we're interviewing Clint today is his involvement, his family's involvement in the Foster to Adopt movement. He's adopted a child already and is in the process of adopting a second child. Is that right, Clint?
That's exactly right. You got it, Jim.
So I'm excited to get to talk with Clint. I'm going to ask Clint to introduce his family and give us a little background on him.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for the opportunity. A little over 22 years ago, my wife and I got married, and I know that early on in her life, she had a lot of hopes and desires, and man, it's been an amazing journey. We have 3 children. What I like to say at this point is we have 3 kids in 3 different ethnicities, and God has painted a picture of our family that I never could have dreamed or imagined, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm specifically thankful for my wife and her ability to hear the voice of the Lord. We have 3 kids. Arpita, who is 15, and she is originally from India. We adopted her from India. And then we have our second child, Blair, who is 12 years old, and he's our bio, and he's an amazing, fun kid. And then we are in the process of adopting a little boy, and we'll call him Jesse. He's 4 years old, and just a bundle of joy. Has like many kids in foster care, some medical needs, but he is. We've had him for 3 months in the process of fostering to adopt with him, and so life is always busy, always fun, but so thankful for how God is painting the picture of our family.
Yeah, busy and fun. I've heard a little bit about the busy part. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I always like to start my shows with a quote. I just find the wisdom that's been put on paper by others is really interesting to get us started. Today's quote is from an unknown author. I wish I could attribute it, but I can't. But it's really, I think, appropriate for today. Here's the quote. I always questioned if I was ready to adopt, and then I realized no child was ready to be an orphan. And so, it speaks to our hearts. We kind of adopt or don't adopt based on convenience, I think. And you know what? It's never convenient for a child to be left without parents. There's never a great time for that. But God is sovereign. He creates these situations, and it's up to us to follow God's leading. And the fact that there are children out there who need to be adopted is clear enough sign for us as believers that we need to step into that gap. So we're going to find out more about that. In fact, in addition to giving a quote, I always want to make sure we have a biblical foundation for our show's content. This is not just me and what I think or what anyone else thinks. There's one scripture in particular that comes to mind for me in this whole situation. That's from James in the New Testament, chapter 1, verse 27. It says, "Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." Basically, it says, it gets right down to, if you're going to claim to be religious, you're going to have a religion, then it ought to be first about taking care of orphans and widows in their distress. And it's distressful when you don't have a family to lean on. And we can't even imagine that those of us who did grow up with one or two parents who loved us and took care of us from the very beginning, what an amazing problem it is. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a child without parents, not knowing that you're loved, not knowing that you're going to be taken care of tomorrow. So I'm going to start with this question of Clint. That verse is an important verse. Does this verse speak to all Christians, or does this just speak to those few of us as Christians who are called to be in adoption?
You know, Jim, that's a great question. I don't know about you, but when I read the James 1:27 passage, if somebody were to call me religious and they base it on that definition, that's what I want to be. I want, if I'm going to be religious, to be somebody who looks after widows and orphans and they keep oneself from being polluted by the world. That's a great definition of religion. And I think it's more than me just thinking. There's a lot of folks that have some quotes about this, but I love what Jason Johnson says. He says, foster care, it's not a state and child welfare problem. Foster care is a church problem. Right. It's a gospel issue first. And when we look at this, I believe that we're either called to be foster parents or we're called to take care of hurting children in some fashion, some way. And it's not just something for us to look at as Christians and say, hey, you take care of that. I'll cheer you on back here from the backside. I think it's a response that everybody needs to be helping hurting children. And that's what, when we're talking about foster care, when we're talking about adoption care, when we're talking about international, we're talking about domestic, we're talking about hurting children. And it's important that we as the church are taking care of hurting children. And, you know, just as a side note, I'd say this. I know that when it comes to the church and we believe that all life is important, we can't just say life is important and do nothing about the foster care or adoption crisis that we have here in our culture.
Yeah, you're right. It's convicting because, you know, I rant and rave about, you know, abortion and the abortion industry, but if we're not helping those children who need care, then that kind of rings hollow, doesn't it?
It's a very hollow. It's important that we put our, so to speak, our money where our mouth is. If we're going to say that we believe that all life is important, then we have got to be doing something with that, and that's the gospel. That's good news.
You're right. That's the central aspect of what it means to be a Christian, really. So that's why I say that was a softball pitch for you.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Yeah,
I really certainly believe that this is something all Christians are called to do. There was no qualification. This wasn't just for pastors or just a few. It was for everyone to take care of orphans and widows, and that's a big need today. So, Clint, how did your family get started in this? How did you get started?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a multifaceted. You think, man, that's going to be one answer, but you know, it started. I will tell you that 90%, and this is not a true statistic that I can back up, but when we meet with folks who are fostering, we meet with folks who are in the adoption process. Typically, it starts in the heart of our wives. Our wives are so can be so in tune and so, thank goodness, emotional about the fact that there is a foster care crisis. And it's no different. My wife, even as a little girl, knew that at some point she would adopt a child. Now, when we got married, we didn't even talk about that. And so
Did they tell you that?
she did not tell me that. I wish I would have. No, actually, I don't wish I would have known. I might have balked or something like that. But it started in the heart of my wife, but about, I guess it's close to 10 years ago, we heard about a little girl who was in need of a home in India. We had friends over there, and just kind of friend to friend, and they said, we got this little girl over here who's a couple years old, and we feel like she needs to be adopted by somebody in your Sunday school class. And just because of life and the way things in life were going, my wife had been through a couple of miscarriages, and life had kind of, that it became very clear that it was going to be hard for us to have another bio kid. We had one already, Blair, as I've said, and we were longing for more. And so one day my wife came to me and said, I've been praying about it. And I didn't have the guts to say this before. She said, I've been praying about this, and I believe our Pita is to be our child. And I said, I've been praying too, and that's what God's telling me. And so, long story short, it took a long time, but that was the first time that we actually acted. And then I was perfectly content with 2 kids, and my wife was doing some help with a foster care agency, and she came across Jesse, and she just couldn't get him out of her mind. And she continually prayed about it, and then she brought it to me. And, the interesting thing about Jesse is I can tell you there was no huge aha moment, no flashing neon sign, hey, you're supposed to do this. It simply came down to this. If I said no, it was all because of self and because of what I wanted. And as I reflected, as I prayed, God just said, hey, you can do this. And so we've been on that journey for the last 4 months, and so we've done adoption international. Now we're doing domestic with foster, and then foster to adopt. And so it's a fun journey, and I'm so thankful that my wife had the heart for that, and has in this respect has led me in this. This is not something that I've been able to take the bull by the horn, so to speak. She's the one that's led, and I'm so thankful for that.
There's a great lesson in that. I wasn't planning on even talking about it, but sometimes we as Christians think that men have to be the leaders in everything, and that's kind of a corrupted notion. I think our wives are gifted in ways that God knew that we needed when He put us together.
Absolutely.
He's a stupid man who won't listen to the leanings of his wife. So, that's a great lesson for us men. So what's it like at your home now with a foster to adopt child? Just give me a picture of your home.
Well, it all depends. I will tell you that, as I said, that Jesse has some medical needs. We've gotten to spend, since he's been with us for about 4 months. Over 4 months, we spent a couple of those months, and I mean a couple of months in the hospital. He's been having some medical issues, and so my wife, and then as you said, I've had an accident. I got to spend some time in the hospital. We've spent a lot of time at the hospital, and what that's meant is sometimes we're with our bios, sometimes we're with our big kids, sometimes we're with one of us is with Jesse, or we just kind of have divided and conquered. And what that's really meant is life has been extremely busy, which all of us are busy anyway. But really what's happened with us is we've seen that any margin in our schedule has been taken away. And sometimes we don't talk about in foster to adopt. We don't talk about some of the struggles that we face because we want everybody to do it. Sure. But I will tell you that it's been extremely hard. This has been one of the toughest things that we've ever done in our life. Adoption, compared with the international adoption, was easy compared to this. This has been really hard, but it's been really good. We have, I will tell you that foster care, I truly believe this, that whatever issues that you have, it brings them to the surface very quickly. And because you're taking your focus off of yourself, and that's been really hard but really good. And I will tell you that I truly believe that my wife and I have never been closer as a couple, but we've had to work at it. And it's exposed some things, but it's also exposed the fact that we need each other. And so thankful for that. And I can also tell you, too, as we're kind of painting the picture, as a family pastor, I've never felt more love for my church family as I have over the last 3 or 4 months as we've embarked on this journey to be foster to adopt parents.
Well, you told me the last time we met that one of the key things you think has to happen, and we'll talk about it later. planned to ask you specifically, but it seems like this is the right time, that it's critical for a family, if you're going to foster, because it's hard, you got to have support. You got to have others to come alongside you. And you have told me, I think it was like 5 families.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If the research would tell us that you've got to have 5 families surrounding you, or it's going to be, you're going to quit. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why as the church, we're not saying everybody is to be a foster family, but everybody has a part to play in the foster care crisis. And, you need things like people who are certified to babysit or respite care, which simply means that they're able to take them for a couple hours. You've got to have a couple of families around you that are able to do that, because you need to get away. You need to make sure that your marriage is the first thing on, God first, marriage second, kids third. And if you always put the kids first, you're going to get things out of whack. So you got to have that respite. You also need folks who are going to pray for you, who are going to take you before the throne of God and pray for you, because you're in the midst of the trenches. You need that. You also need some financial. Early on, you do get some subsidies to take care of these kids. But early on, there's a huge expense that comes up, and so you need somebody who's able to front some money to you to help out with those expenses. It takes about 2 to 3 months before you get right side up on those expenses, and that can be devastating considering that you're doing this great work. You need people to bring meals. You need clothing. Most of all, you need people who are doing it who can encourage you. So those are all key parts of having a support system around,
a network of people.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can't expect a government agency to be able to provide those needs. That's the church's job, and so thankful that we have that support system, because it's made this tough time much more bearable.
Oh, that's great. I want to come back to just the kind of the practical aspect of this with your son, your bio son. Yeah. How hard was it for him to accept a sister?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. It took about 3 years once we started the adoption process in international for our Pete's to get here. And so he, as a 2-year-old boy, started praying for his sister, and he called him his sister. And he prayed for her, and he prayed for her. Once she showed up, it was a different ball game, and the wheels kind of fell off, and he had our daughter just blended in beautifully. He had the issue, and we kind of changed birth orders because she was older and he was younger, and we realized that had some issues to play with it. But at the same time, too, now what I'll tell you is their relationship is so fun to watch. Now they're getting into teen years, and she gets fed up with him pretty fast, but it is so fun to watch them and watch them take care of each other. And just to give you a good example of that, my son, our bio was not in the wreck that we had a few weeks ago. My daughter was, and he just went by and talked to her and said, I wish I could have been in the wreck instead of you. And so he just really cares for his sister deeply. So it's been neat to watch. It's not easy to start with, but you get through it, and that's the I think the universal truth about parenting. Sure, it's not always easy, but you get through it.
Yeah, that tells me the fruit of what you accomplished with your son, your biological son. It took a while to see that fruit, and that speaks to parenting. It's a long view. We need to take the long view as parents and not get frustrated with our kids. They're a work in process just like we are.
Absolutely.
And but I think the parent that has patience, like you guys obviously have shown, can see that on the backside, how your son has come along. So it's been a great opportunity for a whole family.
Yeah.
What advice, you started out giving a little bit, but what advice would you give a prospective family who's thinking about fostering?
I would first of all, and I'm going to be different than probably any other person that's wanting somebody to be in foster care. I'd simply say this: understand that it's going to be hard. If you're expecting it to be rainbows and unicorns, you're going to be grossly upset. You're not going to be happy. You got to develop a team. You got to have some people around you who are knowledgeable about what's going on in the process, but also who can support and encourage you. So to be locked into some support, and if you are a Christian, if you are a churchgoer, if you are somebody, ask your church family to walk alongside you in that journey. And then I believe you've got to, if you're married, you need to regularly schedule date nights. You need to be understanding that you got to take care of yourself so that you can take care of these kids. And then finally, I think, understand that you're going to be dealing with in the foster care system. And, this is crazy too. The statistics tell us that 60%, 6 out of 10 kids that come to our churches on a weekly basis come from some type of trauma. So understand that if you're dealing with a kid who is in foster care, they are coming from trauma. They're a background of trauma. Losing your home, not being in your home is traumatic. It's a traumatic event. And so you need to begin to understand trauma, get some trauma-informed care, and then love these kids the best that you possibly can. And you got to come from a good place to do that. And then I guess maybe a final thing is to understand that you're going to have some uncool feelings come up, and to deal with those, to put them out there in the open and let God shine a light on them and let His grace take care of those thoughts that you're having that are not good. Because every single foster parent that I've talked to would say, I was in a dark place or at one point or other. It's simply when you feel that, to let God shine a light on those dark places, and He's graceful and merciful to do that, and I'm so thankful for that. But understand, I think the biggest thing is understand that this is not going to be rainbows and unicorns, but you can do it with the help. And here's the other thing: I have learned over the last 4 months, I can't do it on my own. I can't even do it with the support of my church. I've got to have the daily love of the Lord to help me to love this kid the way that he needs to be loved.
Well, that tells you right there, it's a spiritual job, and that
Absolutely.
takes spiritual resources.
Yes.
And why do we ignore the source of our spiritual health?
Exactly.
When we do anything in life, it's hard, especially.
Yeah. It's a physical, emotional, spiritual experience. That's a great way to describe it. And there will be spiritual attacks because you're loving the least of these. And, as our lead pastor's wife says, when she has a new foster care placement, first thing that she does is she looks at the face of that child and she says, I'm looking into the face of the Lord because He loves the least of these. When you've done this for the least of my brothers, you've done it unto me. And I think that's a great way to look at these kids, and it's right. It's biblical.
It is. Well, with the few minutes we have left, I definitely want to make sure we talk about the need. Just give me a picture of the need. I know where we live in Central Texas, you have some statistics on that.
Yeah,
so.
well, we have coming each year into the foster care system. We have approximately here just in Central Texas, we have about 1,300 new kids who will enter into the foster care process. Over the United States, each year we'll have over 400,000 kids work their way into the foster care system.
That's new. That's every year. That's
more
400,000 more kids to come into the foster care system.
That's exactly right. And what's interesting to me, and probably one of the things that is the most scary to me, is that the average kid who comes into a foster care situation, through their process through foster care, will go through 7 different homes.
Wow.
So that means 7 different families, 7 different situations, 7 different schools, and 2/3 of the kids who find themselves in foster care are 5 years old and older. So we're talking about grade school kids. The majority of people that find themselves in foster care are grade school age children, and they get to go to 7 different homes. And you can just imagine the trauma, the heartache that goes through those kids. One of the things that I can tell you from my own experience with Jesse is that every single day without fail, he looks at my wife at some point during the day and he says, "So is this my forever and ever and ever home?" And she says, "Yes, this is where you're always going to be." And, that's powerful. And it's something that it's happened for the last 3 months. I'm not sure that it'll ever stop. And so, but I'm thankful that we can say yes to him. And it's not always like that for foster care. Maybe it is that you just take care of this kid for a little while. But, we're fortunate in the fact with Jesse that we get to be his forever family.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. It speaks to the need of every child to feel like, hey, I've got a consistent place to be.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to have to move. I can't imagine the difficulty, because it's like you pull your heart out every time you have to relocate. I'm sure it's just logistically it's difficult, but then the connections you finally start maybe liking or adapting to one place, and then you break that connection and go somewhere else. I just can't imagine. But that's why some of these kids have so many emotional difficulties. They're prickly kids. They're hard to love sometimes because they've been bruised and hurt so badly.
Absolutely. That's probably the best way to. They're kids from hurting places, and they're not going to be easy to love, but they're so lovable. And we've seen a lot of success here at our church of bringing in kids who come from hard places and to watch them shine when the love of God and the love of the family meets together with them. It's amazing to see those tough layers come off, and it's something worth being passionate about, obviously.
Sure. Well, now you can speak to others. Well, it's one thing to say people need to do this, you need to do this, but when you've already done it, and not to brag at all, but just to say, hey, I've been struck by this. This is where I'm coming from in my heart. Now you can share that with people in an authentic way. That's got to be impressive. I mean, it's got to be helpful to a church. Because you could come to my church and I don't know those situations, but just to hear you talk about how it's worked and what God said to you in the process would encourage me. It would challenge me. But I think we need to have those stories shared in our churches. We're going to talk, particularly in our bonus time, about what's the church's responsibility and how practically speaking, the church can start to get involved, every church. So we're going to talk about that in a minute with Clint. So we got about a minute left, Dave, and I really would love to remind our listeners that they can buy our podcast. This will be a podcast available at ReaganRadioStore.com, and that would be a great way to support this ministry and the radio station is for people to buy this podcast. Then you could share it with people within your church. This can have a lasting impact by sharing this information. And the only way you're going to get the next 15 minutes that we're going to talk is by buying the podcast. So that would be my encouragement. And not because we're anything special, but just because this is such an important message. Our churches are called to support orphans. It's what Christ would have us do. In the end, he's going to look at us and say, what did you do for the least of these? And we're going to stand there with either an answer or nothing to say. And I don't want to be there being asked that question with nothing to say. So, Dave, thank you for giving us time to talk about this today.
Well, this is the 72nd segment with Dr. Jim Dempsey and Parenting Unchained. And the subject today is fostering and adopting equals pure religion. And Dr. Dempsey's guest today is Clint Neighbors. Thanks, Clint. We're going now into the bonus section, Dr. Dempsey.
Okay, well, we'll start right off with this question. What is the responsibility of the church to this foster care crisis, do you think?
Well, obviously, I think the first thing that we've got to say is it's not a state problem. It really is a church problem. And so when we think about foster care, and here in Texas, there's been some changes in the foster care system. There's been some restructuring, which has been needed. And so what happens is the max number of kids that you can have in your home is a total of 6 kids. So there's a lot of families that would love to have more, but because of the restructuring, which the state has done, has caused the fact that we have kids right now who are staying the night in the CPS office because there's not enough foster care families to take care of the kids. And so I love the way that I believe it's the foster care initiative for the city center. They said it this way: there are children in our city who are without families, who are without permanent homes, who are without support systems, who are without care, and that's not okay. And we will respond. So I think one of the things that we've got to say is, if we look at this and we try to point the finger at anybody else, it's the church's responsibility to begin to really dive into the foster care process. And I can tell you from my perspective, the number one way that happens is if the lead pastor at your church says, we are going to get involved in the foster care system. We are going to be foster care families. We are going to support foster care families. Because leadership, it always goes back to leadership. No matter what we talk about, the speed of the leader, speed of the team, when it comes to foster care, if our lead pastor believes in the fact that we've got to foster, to adopt, or foster, then the church is gonna jump in. And so it's a crisis. And guys, we have the answer because we have the love of Jesus Christ on our side to look at the least of these hurting children, and we have the ability to have an answer for this. And simply, we love because we've been loved. I can't think of a better picture of the grace of Jesus than that He adopted me as a son.
Right.
Why wouldn't I do that for somebody
Sure.
else?
So all Christians are part of the adoption process, whether you believe it or think of it or not, because we were adopted. We didn't belong to God. We weren't in His family. We had alienated ourselves through our sin, and He's the one that pursued us. He came after us. And so you're right. This is pure religion. That's why James says this is the heart of our faith in Christ, is caring for the orphans. So that's absolutely true.
I love just continually, it's not necessarily something in our culture that we always do, but to think of these kids from hurting places and to realize that they are the face of Christ, and to love them because of that, it makes it easier. But it really is. This is a church issue. And this is something, if just one family from every church that's not currently fostering right now, we'd end the foster care crisis across the United States. We'd end it tomorrow. If every church, at least one said yes, I believe we'd end it tomorrow.
Wow. That's a challenge. I mean, that's a doable challenge. It's not unbelievable. It's something that's within our grasp if we will just reach.
Yeah. And the good news is the state does provide us with some resources. But what's been amazing is I know that our foster son has experienced the love of so many people in the church, and he speaks every day about, well, do I get to go see this person? Do I get to go see this person? And he already has experienced the love of the church, and he's already becoming a little missionary. He loves to sing, and he sings Christian songs, and it's fun to be a part of.
Well, and that's where my mind is going right now. Parenting Unchained, one of the things that we're convinced about is that it's the parenting the heart, or changing the heart of a child, is what God wants. It's not enough just to care for the physical needs of children. So who better to take care of foster kids needing fostering than the church? That we can give them something that the world will not be able to give them. And that's a relationship, or an introduction to the real source of love, and that's a relationship with Christ. That is, we talk about, and I know churches cry about how we're not reaching people for Christ, we're not converting very many, not as many baptisms. Well, why don't we get some kids, foster these kids, bring them into the love of Christ that way? We know they're more likely then to take up the mantle of Christianity if they've been cared by a Christian family.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because they've experienced love. And Jim, I agree with you. One of the things that we find in foster care is, obviously, we have kids with hurting hearts. The hard part sometimes is to get past the behavior, right? To work our way through the levels of behavior, because it's not easy if a kid is screaming and
they probably are a mess
and telling you no, and have gone through trauma. But to pull back those layers and see the heart that's hurting, and to the only way that I know how to describe it is to comfort that heart. That's when they can actually receive comfort. That's when you begin to see a change, and it's exciting to see. And we're still in the throes of behaviors, but we obviously see the heart behind this little boy, and we're excited to get to love on him, and hopefully love on him the way Christ would love on him.
Sure.
It's not always easy, but it's always right. It's always right.
That's great. What if a listener wants to get involved, but the pastor doesn't take the lead, or hasn't taken the lead yet? Maybe seems uninterested. What can that person do?
Well, first of all, I would say that you can reach out to there's a local local resources anywhere that you go, that and reaching out to a local foster care agency, they can put you in touch with the right people. But if your pastor is not a part of that, you want to find some folks who have had a good experience, and to be able to surround yourself with people who can encourage you and say, hey, this is the right thing to do. Obviously, here's an interesting thing that I'm going to say to some of our folks, but when it comes to this foster care, we've got to. I lost my train of thought, but to be a foster parent is not going to be easy, and you've got to surround yourself with people who will speak encouragement into you. Sure. And I truly believe this. Some people are not called to be foster parents. We just don't want them around our foster kids, but they can always be a support. There's always a way for them to support, whether it be financially, whether it be through encouragement, whether it be through food, whatever that might be.
Yeah, providing respite is
absolutely
critical.
It's just not everybody is called to it, but you need to have people who can speak truth and say, "Hey, I see this in you," or let's talk about that. I think it's important to have that support system around you.
I know from talking to other foster families, there's some bars you got to jump over to just qualify for foster care, for children to be in your home. What sort of hurdles? And these are good hurdles. Not, I don't necessarily say they're bad, but because you don't want everybody in this process. So, what are some of the bars or hurdles you have to clear?
There's a significant amount of training that each foster care agency will do, and so you'll need to make sure that you're a part of that. You'll have to have a home study where a person will come in and ask you about your home, how you handle discipline, what do things look like. You also have to have a home study, a home inspection of your home, make sure that your home is safe for children. And then you've got to figure out, you've also got to have conversations with your kids that are currently at your home. If they're not on board, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, they could probably scuttle this whole deal, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk with our kids about is, we're bringing in kids from hard places. This is not going to be easy. And when we talked about bringing Jesse, we simply asked our kids, "Hey, where are you at? Are you on board?" And we made them give them a number 1 out of 10. And we weren't ready to move forward until they said yes, and they did, thank goodness, and so we are where we're at. So there's lots of different things that you've got to consider, but this process, we did it really fast as far as the training and everything that we did, but it took 2 months. So we're talking, all the trainings, all the things that you'll need. For an average family, it's going to take between 3 and 4 months.
Gotcha. Obviously, you didn't say this, but I think it's number one is husband and wife have to be absolutely of one heart in this matter.
Yeah, if you're not, it's devastating.
Yeah, that could really wreck a marriage. It could do all kinds of problems. So I want us to, we'll talk a little bit about it, but I think there's a scripture that we really have to read here that sets this in clearer context, and that's from Matthew 25, verses 31 to 46. It's a fairly long passage, but we've talked about it before, and I just think it's critical to see what Christ would tell us in this situation. Jesus said himself, and I'm quoting now, "But when the Son of Man comes in his glory," of course, when he said Son of Man, he's speaking of himself. When Christ comes in his glory and all the angels with him, and he will sit on his glorious throne, all the nations will be gathered before him. He will separate them from one another as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" The king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick, and in prison, and you didn't visit me." Then they themselves will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he'll answer them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." Those are hard words. Because, he draws a line in the sand, and there's a clear separation between those who will step up and care for the least of these. And, that's judgment. People don't want to face that. But I think the church has a very sacred responsibility to respond to those words that Jesus himself said. They were preserved by God's grace so that we could read those today, the very words of Christ. And he's telling us, if we do not take care of the least of the people that we run across in our lives, we have essentially slapped him in the face. And I'm guilty of that many, many times.
It's a scary thought. It's a sobering thought. But, this is just such a practical piece of Scripture for us to take and to put into practice. It really is. It's hard, but it's simple. It's not easy. But you know what we're really saying in that moment when we do things for the least of these? We're just saying no to ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that's the number one thing that I'm learning through this is, if I can say no to myself, I can do this all right. It's going to be okay. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean that I'll have everything that I need to make it through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I've heard it said, and that God never calls us to something that he won't equip us for.
Right.
And sometimes we don't see the rewards in this life. I have to keep telling myself, I might not see it here, but I'm promised incredible rewards. Fellowship with Christ is enough of a reward for all of us. But there's one thing I want to just cap with, and that is one of the deceptions I write about in the book that sometimes parents get caught up in, and we parent this way, but we treat ourselves this way too, is that life should be easy. Mm-hmm. That life on this earth is about accumulating and being comfortable and having financial security. Yeah. You hear that a lot of times, financial independence. Well, that is not what God says our ultimate goal is, and we need to make sure we parent that way too. So I applaud you not only for taking care of kids who need care, but you're raising your kids to understand that life is not about yourself, that we do serve others, and I think there's great fulfillment in that. So your kids are seeing practical application, that we're not called just to take care of ourselves and put ourselves on a throne. We're really called to serve others.
What's exciting for me is I can already tell you, all three of those kids that are being raised in my home, and they get to call them my sons and daughter, is they're going to blow past me. And my prayer is that they will, that they'll spiritually just blow past me, and that they'll take care of least of these in a way that I've not been able to. And so I believe that that's going to be the case. So yeah, it's, I will tell you, the enemy of foster care really is trying to live a comfortable life. If you want to live a comfortable life, wow, foster care is going to be a tough one for you. So, yeah. But it's so good and it's so right.
Yeah. Well, Clint, thank you so much for being our guest today. We've used up our allotted time, and I've taken some of your time away. I know you have a lot to do, so thank you for being our guest, Clint.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Jim.
Dave, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, Dr. Dempsey. Ladies and gentlemen, this show is number 072. When you know of people that have this desire to bring other children into their home through fostering and adopting, that does equal pure religion. And Dr. Dempsey's guest today is Clint Neighbors. And Clint, thanks for being on Dr. Dempsey's show. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week. Thanks.